Thank you for joining Wars of the Rosies as we continue with part 7, The Troubadours, from Orders of the Quest The Holy Grail by Manly P. Hall. The Troubadours, the Manichaeans, the Neo-Manichaeans, and the Post-Manichaeans went far afield to find grist for their mill. There was an old Druidic footing under the culture of the Gauls. One of the 3 branches of the Druidic order was known as the Bards. They were the wandering poets and minstrels, the singers of the mysteries, concealing profound spiritual truths under gay songs, stories, fables, and myths. The Bards were a closely organized group. They had signs, words, and secret means of knowing each other. They had a sign of distress, which compelled others of their order to come to their assistance in time of trouble. These wandering singers and storytellers played an important part in the social and ethical life of early Europe. They carried news from place to place, and needless to say, the reports which filtered through the bards took on a coloring appropriate to the problem of the moment. In this way, these poet-singers exercised a powerful religious, philosophical, and political influence. The machinery of the Druidic mysteries was revived by the descendants of the sons of Manes to become the mechanism behind the troubadours. Actually, there was no breakdown between the ancient mysteries and the post-Reformation revival of arts and sciences, which made possible the modern way of life. Virgil, says W.F.C. Wiginstone, takes up the lightened torch of Homer and hands it on to Dante, who passes it to the genius behind the Shakespeare's mask. The troubadours were armed with one of the most important of all psychological formulas. If one would change the world, teach the young. They appointed themselves the tutors of chivalry, and was regarded as peculiarly equipped to endow youth with an appropriate cultural viewpoint. On the surface, their advice was simple, honest, and effective, and obviously above reproach. They taught, for example, that the genteel man always mended an open seam in his garment. This is more important than to patch a hole. A hole may indicate long wear, but an open seam represents carelessness. Incidentally, these reformers were careful to prevent any open seams in their own association. Any precious bit of advice was, in effect, it is not important that the rich dress well, but most important that the poor dress neatly. Small means plus neatness equals character. It may be inferred by the political consequences of their activities that the troubadours did not limit themselves to a consideration of what the well-dressed young man should wear. Beneath the surface was the doctrine of the rights of man. The order taught chivalry towards the weak, and emphasized that service for the common good was nature's highest calling. From the troubadours came many of these glorious myths and legends of the age of chivalry, the moral fables that right always conquers, and nobility of spirit is the only true nobility to which man can attain. A goodly number of our children's fairy tales were first sung by the troubadours. Sometimes the original story is much older, but these minstrels found a way to adapt the legends to their own purposes. The troubadours flourished in southern France, Italy, and northern Spain between the 11th and 14th centuries. It is now established within certainty that these men, who numbered about 400, were members of a secret mystical or philosophical fraternity, dedicated to the discovery of these powers of the mind and heart, which must be cultivated and disseminated before it is possible to bring about a universal reformation of mankind. In his most stimulating article, Alchemy and the Holy Grail, Harold Bailey writes, "Everyone has heard of the troubadours, but it is not generally realized that they were heretics under the ban of the church, and driven hither and thither by that relentless antagonist. Their mission, Arud tells us, was to redress the wrongs of Rome, to take up the defense of the weak and oppressed. They were also represented and celebrated as the true soldiers of the Christ, the exponents of celestial chivalry, and the champions of the poor. Attacking under all their forms, the monstrous abuses of the priesthood. It is said that great numbers of the higher classes became troubadours, wandering from court to court and castle to castle, spreading the doctrine of the organization for which they were acting as emissaries. In France, the troubadours were protected by the Albigenses, for the obvious reason that both groups held the same convictions and descended from the same source. The great rituals of the troubadours were called the courts of love. Here, under the guise of a most elementary and material passion, they preached the gospel of the divine love of God for man, and the human love which alone could bring the brotherhood of humanity. The troubadours dedicated impassioned ballads to the fair lady of their hearts. Only the initiates, however, knew that this lady was the Isis of Sais, the Sophia of the Gnostics, and the Diana of the Ephesians. From the Melopoeia of Tritonius, Augsburg, 1507. Apollo on Parnassus. This curious woodcut, sometimes attributed to Durer, represents the deity surrounded by the Muses and other mythological characters. The symbolism includes all the emblems which occur a century later in connection with the Rosicrucians and the Society of the Unknown Philosophers. The body of the learned, which formed the secret council of the order, was the custodian of an esoteric tradition that had descended from the Druidic, Egyptian, and Chaldean sages. These minstrels concealed their knowledge from the profane, not because they desired a superiority for themselves, but for the sake of self-preservation. The name troubadour means a seeker after something that is hidden, and minstrel is a minister or a religious teacher. But if the troubadours worked quietly and industriously to further their doctrines, the adversaries were no less cunning. The church and state, aware that open rebellion threatened if the troubadours were successful in setting up their great court of love, or world democracy, quietly but relentlessly tore down each structure raised by the singing sages. To preserve the social status quo, the Inquisition was set up, and one by one the initiates of Manes were trapped on some pretext. The real reason for their destruction was their political plotting against ecclesiastical and temporal autocracy. Once again, the sons of the widow perished at the stake or gibbet, or were broken on the rack. It is said that Dante was a troubadour, and when we examine the structure of the Divine Comedy, the conviction grows. Saint Francis of Assisi is believed to have received his first impression to mystical devotion from the courts of love. Among other important names associated with the order are Richard the Lionheart and the poet Petrarch. The veiled lady of the Shakespearean sonnets and Dante's Beatrice were not mortal women, but the Virgin of the world, the secret mother of the mysteries. We may suspect that Giordano Bruno, a martyr in the name of progress, knew something of these mysteries when he wrote in a letter, "I am displeased with the bulk of manhood, and am enamored with one particular lady. 'Tis for her that I am free in servitude, content in pain, rich in necessity, and alive in death. 'Tis for the woman of true wisdom, and by the studious admiration of this mistress that I disquaint, that I torment myself." Even the uninitiated can scarcely miss the implication. The name of the principal troubadours, from Gila 9, Court of Poitiers to Garat de Guiers, can be traced in any standard text on the subject. From the membership we gain a reasonable comprehension of the stations and ability of these initiate poets and singers. We can also trace the survival of the order in the Minnesingers, later Meistersingers of the Rhine. The principles of the Minnesang reached Germany from Provence, one of the last strongholds of the troubadours. The Minnesingers also addressed their songs to a lady whose name must not be spoken, but in whose service the gallant knight must pine away in desperate poetic devotion. One of the greatest of the Minnesingers, Rainmar of Alsace, was called the scholastic philosopher of unhappy love. Names change, but the substance of the tradition is ever the same. The name Pleiad, from Pleiades, was first bestowed in Alexandria that Egyptian city of initiates, scholars, and libraries upon 7 tragic poets who flourished in the 3rd century BC. Later in French literature, there is reference to the Pleiad of Charlemagne, king of France, also an initiate. In the last quarter of the 16th century, the French Pleiad, a group of 7 poets, of whom Pierre de Ronsard was the most celebrated, attempted the renovation and enlargement of language as a means of literature and art. Lord Bacon is believed to have been in contact with the French Pleiade and has been referred to as the 8th star in the constellation of the poets. Let us not deceive ourselves with the delusion that these servants of the Muses gathered by accident or appeared upon the intellectual horizon merely to glisten for a night. The Pleiade inherited the unfinished labors of the Troubadours, as these in turn were rooted in the confederation of the Orphic poets. Thank you for watching, and please don't forget to share, like, subscribe, and comment. And if you can, please consider donating to Wars of the Rosies. Links to PayPal and Patreon are in the description. Thank you so very much.